Well, hello everyone, Texie88 here, and welcome to another review. And as regular viewers of my channel will know, I recently reviewed the original Rocksmith from 2011 if you're anywhere outside of Europe, or 2012 if you were in Europe like I am. Now, as you may recall, there were some problems with the way Rocksmith operated, not least of which was its rather lackluster career mode and its menu system, and the way it generally did things being more of a grind and a pain in the bum than it really needed to be. Ubisoft took that constructive criticism on board and did this and in October of 2013, Rocksmith 2014 edition came up and was actually rebuilt from the ground up. They did away with that career mode and none of this nonsense about having to unlock songs. Every last song on the disc is with one or two sort of bonus exceptions, is available for selection right from the get-go. And they improved the overall interface. The menu and the overall experience is far more user-friendly. It's a lot easier to find things. It's just generally laid out better. The overall look of it is far more vibrant and compared to the somewhat dank look of the previous game. And although there's no career mode, you can still play in these sort of virtual arenas, and rather than having those rather dead-looking digitized people in the crowd, you actually see them as silhouettes, as if there were lights shining down them while you were performing on stage. It works really well, and as well as still being able to unlock different effects, guitar and bass effects, as you progress. You can also unlock different venues as well. And if you have a Uplay account, you can also get rewarded in that way as well with the different unlocks. I mean, I'm still not impressed with the fact that the string layout is still it still has the default setting of it being with the highest string at the bottom, lowest string at the top, whereas when you look at guitar tablature and bass tablature, well, tablature in general, that's not the order you're seeing it. I would have preferred it if it was if the way you would see it in tab was the default, but at least the option to invert the strings is a lot easier to find this time. And as I said in my review of the original Rocksmith, you can also pay a one-off transfer license fee to export all except 5 of the songs from the previous Rocksmith game and to be able to play them in this. And they will also be retrofitted with some additional features that the previous Rocksmith didn't support. I mean, one prime example is that the previous game could only handle single note natural harmonics, whereas this version now can handle chords, even as harmonics, which and any downloadable content released since this Rocksmith 2014 edition came out will only work in that. They are not backwards compatible with the original Rocksmith. Only the songs that were released prior to this coming out will work in both the original Rocksmith and Rocksmith 2014. Now, as you can see, I've got both the Microsoft Xbox 360 and the Microsoft Xbox One packaging in front of me. They are essentially the same game. And I stayed within the same console family, which means any downloadable content and exported songs that I paid for on the Xbox 360, with one or two rare exceptions, I was able to download again for the Xbox One at no additional cost. Same thing goes if you stay in the same console family. If you were playing the Rocksmith and perhaps Rocksmith 2014 on the PlayStation 3, as long as the follow-up console was the PlayStation 4 and you stayed using the same gamer profile, then you'd have the same entitlement. And when it came to Rocksmith 2014 on the Xbox 360, some versions were just soulless like this. I didn't have to get the version with the real tone cable, which was also available at the time, because I already had the real tone cable from the first Rocksmith, which always came with it. And if we look at the back, it'll also show you a selection of the songs that are actually on disc. As you can see, there are some one or two pretty good names in there. Another thing that's new to this is that the Rocksmith 2014 edition supports more alternate tunings than the first Rocksmith did. I mean, even some of the on-disc songs use E-flat standard, which is standard tuning down half a step or a semitone, depending on which part of the world you're in. Here in the UK, they're called semitones. In the United States, a semitone is known as a half step, with a tone being a whole step over there. And there are also some additional there are also some additional lessons for techniques, as well as revamped ones of ones you're used to from the first game. They've also included some additional ones. They also show you how to do a pinch harmonic, which are those usually high-pitched squealy notes that you might hear in, say, rock and metal solos, and occasionally you might hear it in verse riffs. I mean, Bon Jovi's "You Give Love a Bad Name," you actually hear some pinch harmonics in the verse riff, the guitar riff in the verses. And like the original Rocksmith, some versions actually came with an Epiphone Les Paul Jr. guitar. And it's also worth pointing out that there are some songs where you'll have a tuning that's something like E standard A461. I mean, the Kinks song "You Really Got Me" is on disc, and the reason it's got that in is that because the Rocksmith games use studio recordings instead of, say, a live version, or sometimes there were issues where a recording done in a studio would have its tape sped up or slowed down. Sometimes it was just a little, and other times it was quite significantly. And as a result, this would mean that if the tape was slowed down, then the original recording would be slightly lower than the concert pitches to which it was originally played, or slightly flatter than it was originally played, as the technical musical term for it is, or sharper, which means that if in the case of the tape being sped up, which would mean that the pitch would be higher than originally played. And in the case of the aforementioned "You Really Got Me," the tape would have been substantially sped up, with concert pitch being A440. And the tuning for "You Really Got Me" in the game being A461, that's quite a bit sharp of concert pitch. And because of that, when you select a song which has a different tuning, it comes up with a built-in tuner, and it'll say things like, "This original recording is slightly sharp or slightly flatter," of, well, E standard in this case. Some of the songs, Ubisoft were able to get additional permission to shift the pitch of the studio recording in game to A440. But sometimes artists say, "No, I don't want my work altered. I'd like that studio recording's original pitch to be left in your version, in the version in your game." And if whenever that happens, they either have to put the song into the game with that pitch offset, or they're not allowed to do the song. They can't just alter the pitch without permission. You know, one song that's on disc where they did get that kind of permission is "Every Breath You Take" by The Police. The original recording is flat compared to how they originally played it, but they had permission to shift the pitch to A440, so you don't have to tune down in order to play that. And some of the songs that one or two on disc ones, as well as some that later came out as downloadable content, also cater for capos, which are essentially these clamp type things that you can put on the neck at a specific fret to effectively be able to play chords at a higher sounding pitch without having to completely relearn and refinger everything. And also because some chord shapes would be impractical or even impossible without the capo. It's not cheating at all. And another as well as the lessons, there's also the return of the Guitarcade, and there's which has another selection of games to help you improve the different aspects of guitar and bass playing. Those only work in E standard, so if you've been playing songs in any other tuning, you would be asked to retune to E standard A440 before you could even do one of those games. There's also a tone designer where as you progress, as I said, you unlock different tones, and you can actually use those to customize and come up with a tone that you can select at any point during a song, or even during I believe during the session mode. Now the session mode is a great place where people can just tinker and have this sort of virtual band seemingly reacting to the way they play. It's really quite clever, and lots of people, even guitar teachers some guitar teachers have actually praised the session mode for what it allows you to do. It's too hard to explain succinctly. It's one of those things you just have to try for yourself, but it works really well. And you see it says multiplayer. If you're thinking that you'll be able to play alongside other people online, forget it. Even in this, there's no means of playing alongside even one other person over the internet. Even with this, even though this is a lot faster. I mean, for example, this loads a song in a matter of about 5 seconds or so at the best of times, whereas the previous Rocksmith, it could take at least half a minute at the best of times. So that being, but even though this Rocksmith 2014 edition is genuinely faster and superior to its previous incarnation, it's the general technology was still not fast enough that there could be online play without significant lags, making it nigh on impossible to realistically play it that way. So multiplayer is two people playing a song on the same console or computer. You can either have two people on guitar, perhaps one playing rhythm and another playing lead, or you can have one on guitar and one on bass. And I believe that, from what I recall, there were some versus modes, but I didn't tend to use them because I don't really think this kind of thing should be a competition in that way. I really think that that's just a personal opinion. I just think it goes against what learning to play an instrument like the guitar or bass guitar is all about. I mean, firstly, slow progress is still progress, and secondly, the fact that you're actually giving the real thing a go is would also be rewarding of a pat on the back in itself. And as you can see there, if you had the Xbox 360 with Kinect, you could actually use your voice to navigate. For instance, you could actually literally just say the song that you wanted to play, and it would take you straight to that song. Well, more often not. When you had Mr. abbreviated to MR, I mean, for instance, the Alice Cooper song "No More Mr. Nice Guy" is on there because it didn't pick up on Mr. being abbreviated to MR. You actually have to say "mr," which is a bit amusing. I actually had the same problem when I downloaded the DLC of the Killers pack when it eventually came out for the song Mr. Brightside. I had to say as "mr. Brightside" to get that to work. So that's a bit of an amusing, albeit some slightly irritating way of having to call out that song in that way. But as I said, in 2016, Rocksmith 2014 Remastered Edition came out. Although it was available separately in stores and online, anyone who already had either of these versions of the 2014 edition would be able to get a free upgrade to the additional features, and that did away with the need to use Kinect in that way, because it actually allowed you to sort the list by various different things, and you could actually directly key in a name, or at least part of a name, to search for it that way. So even people that didn't have Kinect could get straight to the song they wanted just by keying in enough of its title to be unique. And if there just happened to be, say, 2 songs with the words "love" in it, then they would just be able, it would come up with all the selections, then you just pick the song you want from this much smaller list. And if you're interested, and if you just want to play a run of songs that are in E standard or in drop D, and you just happen to be in either of those tunings at the time, you can sort by tuning, which will put, say, all of the ones E standard next to each other, and all the ones drop D next to each other, all the ones E flat standard next to each other, all the ones E flat drop D flat next to each other, etc. There were more additional tunings as the DLC went on. I mean, we did eventually get things like D drop C and C standard in some later DLC releases. And the back of this one's essentially the same as for the Xbox 360 version. Again, even this version of Rocksmith 2014 allowed for Kinect. So what's my verdict on Rocksmith 2014 edition? Well, it's really impressive. It still won't teach you everything though, because I mean, one notable omission from the lessons is sweep picking, which is where you can sort of glide a plectrum across the strings while fretting as you did so. That's probably the best way of describing it to a person who's not versed in the ways of the guitar and bass. But that is a bit of a glaring omission, and it is a shame there isn't even just something that can give you some ideas on how to learn to do that, and some techniques you could practice in order to get good at it. Now, as I say this, back in April of 2020, Ubisoft, after many weeks of almost continuously releasing downloadable content, they stopped releasing DLC for these versions of Rocksmith and Rocksmith 2014 Remastered Edition. I believe they've got something up in the pipeline which is related to it, which is supposedly due to come out on the upcoming consoles. But as far as I know, they haven't actually said what that is. I seem to recall Ubisoft saying that it was a means of it was music related, so it may be another version of Rocksmith for those. It may be something that even expands on it and allows other instruments alongside the existing guitar and bass. At the moment, I really don't know. But Rocksmith 2014 edition is a substantial improvement over its predecessor. And even though it does have some glaring omissions, there are still some latency slash calibration issues, particularly if you're plugging directly into a television. It's still a really good product, and it's still genuinely fun to play, and I highly recommend it. So if you were put off by the previous Rocksmith, don't be put off by this. This basically improves on everything that was such a chore in the previous Rocksmith, and then some. I'd happily give Rocksmith 2014 edition 9 out of 10, especially if you were getting the remastered version. Even if you did end up getting this version, there'd be an online update to update it to the remastered edition, and it's a really good product. I mean, I do still have issues with it sometimes, calling chords by names that aren't really appropriate in the key that's being played in. I mean, for instance, I've seen some occasions where a chord was called E when, well, E5, when under the circumstances of the tune being played, F flat 5 would have been more musically correct. It's one of those things you would only know if you had actually studied music theory to any great extent, and none of the Rocksmith games actually really go into that music theory in that level. So I'm a bit worried that could also cause people to pick up bad habits, thinking that, say, F sharp and G flat are one and the same, and that the names are interchangeable. They're not. There are times when it is far more musically correct to call a note or chord F sharp, and other times when it's more appropriate to call it G flat. Even though they might be the same pitch, there is a difference between the names, and it's a bit worrying that this could potentially lead to bad habits like that, and it could cause embarrassment for the pupil later. But even despite those, I'd still happily give this product a 9. What it does, it generally does well, and it gives enjoyment even to people who just like to play just for a bit of fun. So hope you enjoyed this review. Catch you on another one soon. Texie88 out.